Welcome to tonight's live stream. I'm going to get started in a minute. Just need to let everybody know that the stream is on. What's going on, Nightingale Wednesday Nightmare? What's going on, Dory? Glad to see you all here. I'm going to get started right now. And tonight's topic is going to be the fear of Black empowerment. Now, when I take a critical examination of what transpired in that courtroom of the Amber Guyger trial, I saw the complete fear of Black empowerment. And that fear of Black empowerment wasn't from the white people. No, that fear of Black empowerment came from the Black people. Now, all of those Black people in that courtroom, when they had power like that judge, did not make any efforts to exercise that power to mete out justice and make a powerful statement to the world that white supremacy and racism would not be tolerated. Because your Amber Guyger was a open racist and white supremacist, and that black female judge and that mixed jury could have made a powerful statement to the world that they were not going to tolerate white supremacy. And they could have made that statement by holding Amber Guyger accountable for her actions. And they could have made a powerful statement by giving this woman the maximum sentence that the law allows. But because these black people feared the power that they wielded and feared using the power that they were given, they decided, instead of them using their power to make a statement that would be a powerful legal precedent, to send a message to every white supremacist like your Amber Guyger, these cowards decided to submit and defer to white supremacy, even though God had blessed them with the power to empower themselves. They had the power to go out here and hold Amber Guyger accountable, punish her to the maximum state of the law, and send a message to all of white supremacy that their violence and terrorism would no longer be tolerated in this 21st century. But instead of them going out here to make that powerful statement, what those black people in that courtroom did, because they were so afraid of white supremacy, was they put on a minstrel show to the point where they turned a courtroom into a church. And as they praised the God that they all served, they went out of their way to turn Amber Guyger, a convicted murderer, from the perpetrator of a crime into a victim. And when I looked at that, it was one of the most disturbing things I ever saw in my life. And it showed me how afraid many of these black people are of taking power over their lives, because people who are granted power, they understand their responsibility to wield that power. And because they understand the responsibility as related to wielding that power, they use that power in a way to empower others. But your people in that courtroom, like that mammy of a judge, that bailiff, and even those two beta males that are a part of the Gene family, they didn't understand what black empowerment was all about, because all of those people, they were submitting to white supremacy. And because they were submitting to white supremacy, all they wanted to do was go out here and look for a way to apologize for holding this white woman accountable. And I found that to be quite troubling, because it just showed how they were deifying and worshiping this white woman instead of trying and making an effort to make a statement with an interpretation of the law that would hold this woman accountable for her egregious behavior and hold her to a standard and create a brand new standard for everyone to follow as related to the treatment of black people. Instead of her going out of her way to make that statement, this judge decided, and the people in that courtroom decided, they were going to go out here and show how much they love white supremacy by going out here like that bailiff, going out here patting and stroking her hair like a Barbie doll. And then you had this judge who was so unprofessional that she got up off the bench and hugged your Amber Guyger. And then um you had that those members of the Gene family, those two beta male losers, Botham Jean's brother, talking about how he forgives her, and then he's going on to go on and hug this white woman. Then you have the father going on to go out here and talk about how he wants to be friends with the very same white female who murdered his own son. I mean, these people are so scared of taking power, and they are so loyal to white supremacy. It's just not funny. And that was one of the sad things to see, because all of these people, again, had been placed in positions of power. I mean, we have a black judge. I believe we had a black DA. We had a black police commissioner. We had black people in positions of power, but instead of them using those positions of power to empower black people, it was all about how they were going to acquiesce to white supremacy and show how they were good Negroes and how they were so loyal to their slave masters. And that just shows how all of those people were afraid of taking power, and they were afraid of taking power because they were afraid of losing something, because they were afraid that they would lose their powerful positions. Well, they weren't going to lose their powerful positions, because all of these people had been elected, or some of them had been appointed, and they were in these positions of power. There was nothing they were going to lose, but they were so scared of losing things. And that's why they were out here submitting and deferring to these imaginary white people in their minds, and looking to submit to white supremacy in a way to the point where they showed us all what religion they really were all about. They were not about serving the living God that they all talked about in that courtroom. No, because the God that I know is not a man. And the God that I know does not lie. And the God that I know would look at all of those people out here worshiping this white woman, and he would look at them and see the behavior that these black people participated in as blasphemous. And the reason why he would look at it and say it as blasphemous is because they violated the first commandment of the Mosaic law, which God gave to Moses, saying, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." And the commandment that Jesus gave, where he said to love the Lord with all their heart, all their soul, and all their spirit. And we clearly see that what God they were serving in that courtroom, and the God they were serving in that courtroom was that white woman. And this is one of the things that people don't understand about white supremacy, is that the ultimate God in white supremacy is not the white man. The ultimate God is this white woman. And all of those black people, they were serving that God. And what really upset them was that their God had been punished and brought down to the level of a man. And that's one of the things that they were feeling convicted and guilty about, that their God was being brought down to this level of a person and being held accountable like a person. And the way those people behaved really showed how your black people deify and worship white women. And that was something that was even seen with one of the jurors who had a blonde weave inside of her head. And again, making excuses about the sentencing, making excuses about the overall verdict, and making this whole to do about how they were feeling remorseful because they had to punish this God that they serve. And this is that just shows how many in the black community, how they fear taking power because they fear upsetting these white women and these white men, because they worship these white people like gods. And this was something I wrote way back in 1999 when I was writing Isis and her observations about how your black people see white people like gods, and how these black people see a white man's opinion as the law. And as I see it now, I see this white woman's whole emotional state as something they need to fear. These people fear this white woman and this white man more than the living God themselves. And they show us all that they, what God they all truly serve. So you can't get black empowerment from a group of people who are too afraid to take power, even though God has granted the black man and the black woman power, because all of these people, they were your so-called college educated, so-called professional black people, the people who were supposed to be in a place where they could take economic power, take political power, take judicial power, but instead of them making an effort to use the power that God had blessed them with, they then decided to use their power and give it right back to the devil, and decide to give him the power and give him the glory by going out here and acquiescing to white supremacy. And that, when you look at that, again, it just shows how weak black people are out here, a lot of them who are supposed to be our so-called best and brightest black people. They fear taking power, and they fear taking power because they fear losing things. But those of us who understand the living God, we understand that when God gives you power, you have to have faith to continue on, because God would not take you this far without taking you to the destination. But black people can't get to the destination. They wind up stalling and stagnating. And the reason why they wind up stalling and stagnating is because instead of them taking the power that they need to take, they wind up giving in to white supremacy because many of them are complete cowards and they are more scared of losing things in this world than trying to move the race forward. And this is why the black race was literally embarrassed this week at this Amber Guyger trial because we had an opportunity to make a powerful statement in that Texas courtroom by putting this racist white woman in her place. But instead of them putting the racist white woman in her place and making a condemning statement against white supremacy, all of these Negroes buck danced, bojangled, submitted, and acquiesced, all because they wanted to continue to get crumbs from the master's table instead of trusting in the living God to deliver them. Because these people say that they are Christians, but they are not Christians. A person who follows the Most High living God understands that when those do wrong, its vengeance is mine, says the Lord. And the Lord puts people like judges in places to punish those who do wrong. But when those who have been given power don't empower themselves to punish those who do wrong, they show the world what God they truly serve because God facilitated them with all of the tools to take power. But these black people did not want to take that power because they were so terrified of a white man and they were so terrified that if they punished this white woman, there would be some so called consequences when there was nothing to fear at all. These black people had no faith in the living God to deliver them, and they have delivered a powerful blow that has set back the entire black race for a good the whole rest of the century, I believe. And the reason why I believe they have set back the black race is because here you have, again, a black DA, I believe, a black judge, black and Hispanic jury, and here they have a white supremacist racist on trial. And they could have made a statement to hold this white supremacist accountable, and they could have made a death blow to white supremacy because your white woman is the woman, ultimate woman in white supremacy, and she is the one who teaches the culture of white supremacy to the entire world. But instead of those black people taking that power, what they did was go out here and say, okay, well, we need to find ways to give her a pass. And what they did was give a pass to white supremacy and continue to support white supremacy in this country and continue to make white supremacy the law of this land. It's these kind of people, black people, who are a problem here in America because it's that codependent mindset that these people have that they cannot take power that prevents black people from empowering themselves and moving the race to the next level. Because it's these kind of people who believe that without a white person there to validate them, a white person there to approve of them, a white person there to say that they have value, these people don't believe that they have value in and of themselves because the Most High Living God made them. The Most High Living God created them, and the Most High Living God gave them a purpose on this earth. No, these people don't see how they have been blessed because they don't believe in the living God. No, they believe that their God is the white man, and they believe that their God is this white woman. Those are the gods that they serve, and they showed the world when they turned that courtroom into a church. And after your Amber Guyger was convicted and sentenced, all of those black people went out of their way to have church and go out of their way to try to find a way to get salvation from a convicted mortal white woman. And they wanted salvation because they believed they had committed a great sin by convicting this white woman. And they believed that they needed to find a way to atone for that sin. But again, anybody who has read their Bible knows that God is not a man and he can never lie. So when I look at these black people, I see not only what I believe to be mental illness, but I also see a deep self hatred. And you cannot take power if you hate yourself, because people who hate themselves, they can't take power because they don't see a value in themselves. Because if you don't see a value in yourself, then how can you go out here and take power and go out here and use your power to build something like a black community? Because the start of the foundation of black empowerment starts from within. That's something black people really don't understand. They're thinking that it's education, economics, and politics. But in order for us to have black empowerment, a person's perception, it starts with their perception of self. Because in order to have a black empowerment mindset, a black person has to see value in self, and they have to see worth in self. And sadly, we saw in Texas that those so-called educated professional black people, that in spite of them being part of a black middle class and even being part of a black political structure, because they had no value of self, they could not empower themselves in that courtroom. And that was something that was quite troubling to me, because it proved the point about that I see about self-hatred. And that's one of the reasons why the black race has not been able to advance in 50 years, because black people don't see a value in other black people. And what was really deeply, deeply troubling to me was you had members of this man's family who saw no value in this black man's life and saw more value in a white woman who murdered their own son and their own brother's life. And that was disturbing for me to see, seeing these black men who are supposed to be a father, who's supposed to be the leader and the head of household in that home, and the brother in the home. Both of them saw more value in that white woman than they saw in their own son and their own brother. That is a damning statement about how deep the damage white supremacy does to the mind of the black man. And it's a damning statement on black men for them to sit there and put this white woman on a pedestal like a god and sit there and make her above themselves. That is the most condemning statement I have ever seen in my life regarding your black man sitting there after your brother or your son is murdered and saying you love this white woman who has nothing but hate for you and giving her nothing more than a pass for murdering your own flesh and blood, sitting there giving her a pass that if the roles were reversed and this Botham Jean had actually murdered Amber Guyger, those same white supremacists would go out of their way to throw the book at your Botham Jean, and they would use an all white jury to go out of its way to then sentence him with the maximum amount of years the law was allowed. And if a death penalty was on the table, they would have given Botham Jean the death penalty. But it's blacks like this that impede black empowerment, and they are used as tools by your white supremacists to go out here and then go out and oppress other blacks, because it's blacks like this who believe that they are special, and it's blacks like this who believe that because they have a certain position in the world that the white man is favoring them, and again showing us how they are making this white man and this white woman into a god. Again, a violation of God's first law in the Mosaic law, and a violation of Jesus's law that he spoke when he gave the commandment in the New Testament. So again, these same people, Christians, so-called Christians, don't even understand what's in this Bible, because they are practicing the religion of white supremacy. And because they practice the religion of white supremacy and worship this white man and this white woman, this is something that shows how deeply damaged black people are. Because if we're going to talk about black empowerment, this starts again with the mind, and it starts with the perception of self, and it starts with the way we think about ourselves. Mojo King, do I think that there's any hope for black people? Yes, I believe there's a hope for a group of black people whose minds are right, and it's those people who are going to be able to move the race forward. Unfortunately, that's a small group, and they're going to have to separate themselves from this other group of black people who are deeply damaged and very deeply caught up in white supremacy and want to continue staying on the plantation because they see benefits to being on this slave plantation. And because they see benefits to being on the slave plantation, this is why they are out here, even though they have been given power, then give that power right back to their slave masters. And that was one of the saddest things to see in 2019, where we have all of this so-called progress, but we still have a slave mind in the black man and the black woman. I'm going to leave a link to my Patreon, and I would really appreciate it if you guys would donate to my Patreon. I lost a lot of donations, so I need people to go and make donations in order for me to stay making videos. So I would really appreciate it if you were able to donate to the Patreon, or if you could donate to the Cash App. I really appreciate it if you could donate to the Cash App. So I'm going to leave a link to those in the chat. So if you guys would please donate to the Patreon, I'm going to get back into this because black empowerment is something that means a lot to me. And one of the ways you can empower me is by helping me stay on the air with donations, because I've been out of work and this is the only way I make money or pay for the internet. So I really would appreciate it. But black empowerment, a lot of black people are afraid of empowering themselves, and they fear taking power, and they don't understand that when you get power, you have, in some cases, you have to take it, and when you take it, you make a powerful statement to the world that you are somebody that is going to demand respect. Unfortunately, many black people don't want to demand respect or command respect. They are still seeking the approval of white people, and their world does not function unless there is a white person there. And that is one of the most disturbing things about watching all of this Amber Guyger debacle is that we see that our supposedly best and brightest don't see a value in themselves. No, they only see a value in white people. And they measure their value in what a white person does or what a white person says. And again, that is deifying a person, and that is something that the Most High does not want to see done. He does not want to see people deifying white people. He wants to see people trusting in him, and then when he blesses them with power, using that power to show his power, because that's how he shows his power, because we have to see those opportunities and take them to show his power. Because if God gave these black people power, there would have been no punishment for using that power. But when you see somebody like that judge get off that bench, that's a violation of law, what she just did, because a judge is supposed to be impartial. Officers of the court are supposed to be impartial, and she sat there and made this whole courtroom into a church where they practice the religion of white supremacy. But there's a grand fear of black empowerment. Thank you, Raiders 48 Gates. I'm gonna check it now. Check the Cash App now. Okay, I'll check it on my phone, but thank you very much. If you guys want to donate to the Cash App, I would really appreciate it. Um, or if you want to donate to the Patreon, I would really appreciate it. But when I look at black people and I look at our community, we talk about how we want to move our race forward. But again, if our minds are not right and we're not seeing value in self, how can we see value in others? Because many of these same black people talking about forgiveness of your Amber Guyger, if there was another black man or black woman in front of them, what those same people would do is they would express so much hatred for that black man or that black woman. And they would do that because they don't see a value in blackness. They don't see a beauty in blackness. They don't see a love in blackness. And they don't see power in blackness. And if you can say that you have no value as a person and you can devalue your own brothers and sisters, then how can you ask others to value you? Because when you have people who devalue our own people, like they did in that Amber Guyger trial, these are the same people who will sit there and talk about, oh, we need more black owned businesses. We need to support black owned businesses. But none of those same people will set foot in a black owned business because they don't see a value in any of the things our brothers and sisters do out here. And the reason why they don't see a value in any of the things that a brother or a sister in this community does is because they don't see a value in themselves. And because they don't see a value in themselves, that's why they will look at something another black person makes as having less value. And because they will see something that another black person makes as having less value, and they will go out here and see that as worthless, but they will sit there and see something a white person makes as having a higher value than what a black person makes. And that's what something I saw again back in 2018 with the Black Panther movie, and that was quite troubling to me as well because here we have Marvel Studios making this movie that was about Black Panther, created by a white man, two white Jewish men, and you had all these black people in a frenzy over this movie featuring this white person's view of Africa, but all of these brothers and sisters out here, like myself, who create literature that creates a positive image of blackness, like The Temptation of John Haynes, which features a black man as a CEO, and books like those in the John Haynes series, which feature a strong masculine black man, or the ISIS series, which features a strong positive image of a black woman, well, ISIS above, and Eastern Goddess up. These kind of books, you didn't see anybody making efforts to support them or to wage a campaign to get more people reading the works of black people. There was no effort. Thank you, Raiders 48 Gates, for the super chat. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to donate to the super chat, you can do so as well. But there was no effort to go out here and elevate black literature that showed positive fantasy images of black people and get people imagining themselves as black. No, we didn't see any efforts like that by black people back in 2018. And when black men like myself were talking about that, we didn't see anybody talking about. We had people pushing back against us and saying that there was something wrong with us, when there's seriously something wrong with black people for them to go out here and not try to get their own products out there. Because when they make adaptations of Japanese superhero concepts, guess what those Japanese do? They make sure that their products are up at the forefront, and they make sure that they're making money on their products and bringing money to those Japanese creators and those other creators out there. Whenever there's a Latin character, those Latinos are making sure that their products are out there at the forefront and that they are making money for themselves. When they create products, these Japanese, these Hispanics, and many other people out here who have characters and concepts, they make sure that their businesses are empowered. But black people, when they have a character like Black Panther, they weren't making efforts to empower black people. And again, it's because many black people are taught not to see a value in blackness, nor are they taught to see a value in making an effort to empower other black people. Many black people, because they are so caught up in white supremacy, only see a value in those black people who white people elevate, like your Michael B. Jordan and your Ryan Cooglers and many of the so-called black celebrities. They don't mind seeing those black people have success, but when it comes down to black people on the ground, black people on the street, and the low and the long and the brothers out here who are making efforts to create positive black media, they didn't want to go out here and empower those black people, the black people like myself, who would go out of their way to hire other black people, like I did for the cover of John Haynes' Dark Succubus, where I hired Mike Williams, a black man, to design the cover for John Haynes' Dark Succubus, and the cover for John Haynes' A Conversation with Death. I put a black man to work, and that's something that I try to do when I'm doing my books, is trying to put black people to work. But those who don't believe in black empowerment, they sit there and think, oh, I can just go out here and I can believe in this rainbow, and they believe in concepts like, oh, it's all about green, but it's not all about green. And it's all about people working together to keep resources in a community, but black people don't see anything as related to keeping resources in a community. And because they don't value themselves, they don't value the work other black people do, and because they don't value the work people do, what happens is they can't get the economic power or the political power to build a community where they are respected. And this again is all about perception of self. And sadly, too many black people, they don't value themselves. And this is why you see people like what they did in that courtroom in the Amber Guyger trial. Dory, the O.J. Simpson trial was embarrassing to watch. It was basically another high tech lynching. I remember watching it back in the '90s, and everybody was all about trying to support O.J. But the problem with O.J. was again he saw more value in white people than he saw in himself. And what happened was you had people who supported O.J., but O.J. wasn't supporting us. And that was one of the saddest things about that trial was he didn't support us. And then after he was acquitted, he still didn't support us and went on back with those white women and back with those white people. And after that, that's why he wound up with no support because black people, a lot of them woke up and said, look, this guy, he doesn't understand how he was blessed, just like those people in that whole Texas courtroom didn't understand how they were blessed. And all he was about was getting that white approval. And he made those white people into gods when it was Johnny Cochran, who was the black man who created the arguments that managed to save him from conviction because those white supremacists, they were eager to convict O.J. Simpson. But if it wasn't for the living God stepping in and showing black people again his power, then O.J. would not have gotten out of jail. He would still be in jail right now. But again, those black people could not appreciate the power of the living God. They couldn't appreciate how God had blessed them to take power. And instead of them taking power, we saw in the aftermath of the O.J. Simpson trial, just like we see in this Amber Guyger trial, black people buck dancing and bow jangling and looking for approval of their white God instead of thanking and praising the living God for delivering your O.J. Simpson. Luciano, when it comes down to black empowerment, it's not about donating to charities. It's about supporting black owned business. So whenever people go out here and support a black owned business like the SJS Direct Imprint by picking up books like those in the SJS Direct Imprint, this empowers people. And this is something that black people really, they don't really understand about black empowerment. Black empowerment is not something done through charities. It is done by donating to black owned businesses because when black owned businesses have revenue, then black owned businesses can hire people. And if those black owned businesses get big enough, they can have political influence and they can change the narrative. Now, I worked in nonprofit 19 years ago, and I saw the power of white supremacy there. I remember when I was working at the Strive East Harlem Employment Service, which was supposed to be a program that was supposed to be about helping the hardest to place black people and Hispanic people. And at that employment service, sadly, I saw the impact of white supremacy on the black mind. So I know about how these white supremacists have influence over the black mind, and I've seen it firsthand because this was supposed to be about a job readiness program that was supposed to be about empowering black and Hispanic people. And what I saw later on as I was working there with AmeriCorps Vista was a lot of these same black people who were in those powerful positions, just like those people in Texas in that courtroom. Instead of them using that power to empower themselves, they were submitting and deferring and acquiescing to the white people who were in charge. Weren't really in charge, but a lot of these people were in lower positions than they are. I remember working there, and the white people who were below many of the so-called vice presidents there and these executives there who were managers, they were sitting there submitting and deferring to the white people there. And I found that to be quite, that was one of the things I found quite disturbing in the year 2001 when I was there. I was looking, I was like, you are in a higher position than this black white person, but yet you're sitting there submitting and deferring to this white person. And I saw this with both black and Hispanic people, and they were seeing a white person as having higher value than themselves, even though these same people had the same education, and some of them had even more experience than the white people there. And that just shows again how deeply damaged the mind of those people was. And when I saw that 19 years ago, it was just as disturbing then to me as I what it was just saw in that Texas courtroom. And I also saw this also when I was working at City College of New York in their science library, where this so-called pro-black female I was working with these dreadlocks and all of this Afrocentric attire, was out here talking about black empowerment, but was all about when these white people came along, turned into a mammy almost immediately. So again, oftentimes you'll have people who will dress the part talking about black empowerment, but oftentimes when it's time for them to take a stand for black empowerment, they show their loyalty to white supremacy. And that's why when I look at that Texas court, it takes me back to some of my experiences working at Strive and my experiences working at City College, because this is not when I look at that whole situation in that Texas courtroom, it shows me that sadly, in 19 years, nothing has changed as related to your so called professional black people, the black people who were supposed to lead our community to being an empowered middle class. And I look at that so called empowered middle class, and it shows how weak our black people actually are. Because if our black middle class was really empowered, it would be just like the days of the Reconstruction or even the days of Jim Crow, where that black middle class was building wealth and that black middle class was focused on building black families. Unfortunately, our black middle class today is weaker than during Jim Crow and Reconstruction because our black people's perception of self is not to see value in self, not to see value in each other, and to think that white is better and that they need the validation and approval of white people, and that having a white person's attention and approval means that they have some sort of higher value. Well, I'm sorry to say, you have no higher value because you don't value yourself. Trex asks, what can be done to exempt black Christianity's effect on black submissiveness? I'll repeat the question again. What can be done to exempt black Christianity's effect on black submissiveness? Now, the problem with a lot of these so-called black Christians is that they have been miseducated in the Word of God by your white supremacists who have turned the Word of God into this passive religion instead of it being an active way of life. Because those who follow the living God, we understand that the service to God is active, and those who follow the Most High understand that this is a way of life that we live. It is not something about being submissive. It is about having faith to take action, because if God puts things in your way to go out here and do his work, he's going to make a way for you to do that work. But you have to have faith to persevere in the face of adversity, and you have to have faith to continue pushing in the face of all of the obstacles that the enemy places in front of you. But many black people, they don't have any faith in the living God. They believe in a religion, and that religion tells them what they want to hear, but doesn't really tell them how to go out here and act. And again, those who follow the living God understand that living for Christ is something you actively do, not something you passively do, like going to church on a Sunday, like many black Christians do. No, those who follow the Most High know that we follow the Most High every day. And if He wants us to do a work on any day, He is going to make a way for us to do that work. So those people don't understand what Christianity is. They think that it is going out here and being this passive person who is so forgiving and so passive and just sits there and tolerates things, but they don't look at what the way Jesus lived when he was on the earth. Jesus was very active, and when Jesus saw those doing wrong, he called out those doing wrong, starting with the church, because many of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, these were people who were over his church, and all of those people were corrupt. So he called out all of their lies, he called out all of their hypocrisy, because they were practicing the letter of the law to receive approval from these Romans, but they were not following the spirit of the law that the living God made, because the living God made the law about love and compassion, and he wanted it to be something where we treated each other the way we wanted to be treated. And that's why he said in his commandment, after he made the two commandments of love the Lord with all your heart, soul, and spirit, and to love your neighbor as yourself, is he wanted to see people do this, because this fulfilled all of the 10 commandments, because that was what Jesus said. He said, when you do this, it fulfills the law. And the reason why it fulfills the law is because those who are doing this are doing it from their heart, so they don't need to follow a 10 commandments, because they are doing things because they love the Lord. And because they love the Lord, they are out here and they're treating people the way they want to be treated. But your black people, they treat white people the way they believe are better than they are. And when they do that, again, they make these people gods before themselves. They make these people into gods, and they make them into a god, not understanding how they offend the living God. Because what you saw, again, in that courtroom was a courthouse turned into a church. And that was, again, I keep repeating it, and the reason why I repeat, because it was one of the most disturbing things I have ever seen. Luciano asks, do I believe that the two-party system was used to dilute the black people's voice? No, I don't believe that it was used to dilute black people's voice. I believe that black people dilute their own voices because they are too scared to stand up, whether it be your black men who are too scared to stand up against those in the community who are destroying the community, or your black women who are silent against those who destroy the image of the black woman. So it's not the two-party system. The problem is us, and the problem is we don't have the courage to stand up for ourselves the way we're supposed to stand up and speak out for ourselves. We're too afraid of either your white people terrorizing us, or even worse, your black people punishing us. And this is the thing that I'm seeing more than anything, is that we have a group of black people who want to be this elite group, this buffer group, and they want to be the ones who police the black community and the people in the black community who decide to speak out on certain issues, and they want to be the ones who dictate how the black community operates. And you have groups of these black people in factions, whether it be your black elites, whether it be your black bourgeoisie, whether it be your pro-blacks. All of these people are jockeying for the position of who's going to be the boss over the black community, and they want to be the ones who dictate the terms for how the black community is run. So that's what they want to do in the black community. They all want to be the boss over the black community, and they want to be able to dictate the terms. But that again goes against what the living God created, because the living God gave everybody free will. He gave everybody a choice, and he gave them a choice of whether they wanted to follow him or they wanted to follow the devil with these false Christs and these false gods. Trex, when I talk about buffer blacks, I talk not only about those on the left, but I also talk about those who are a part of groups like the pro blacks, these black females who are a part of a black elite group. I talk about these black bourgeoisie, which are these middle class people like you saw in Texas, or I talk about any of these groups. They all want to be the buffers, like your Roland Martins, your fraternities and sororities. All of these people want to be the buffer group that wants to have the power to dictate to the black community. Because you have black conservatives who want to be a buffer, you have liberals who want to be a buffer, you have homosexuals who want to be a buffer, you have people who all want to be buffers. And again, they don't want black people to take power because they want to be gatekeepers over the black community. Thank you, Mogul Maze, for the donation. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to donate to the Super Chat again, or the Patreon, or the PayPal, I would really appreciate it. Or the Cash App, really would appreciate it, because that's how I pay for the internet. And I would also, again, appreciate it if you guys would pick up books like The Temptation of John Haynes. This one will teach you a lot about black empowerment, and it will teach you a lot about having the good self-perception of self, because John Haynes has a strong sense of self and a strong value of self, even when he's running into white supremacy and even running into the devil. His spiritual center with God is the thing that allows him to stay centered. So this is a good book, and I urge you guys to go pick this one up, because it'll show you about having a black empowerment mindset, what many people like Professor Black Truth call a B1 mindset, and how that can influence everyone around you. And you can also pick up the books in the John Haynes series, like Dark Succubus, which I just found out I sold a copy of Dark Succubus in South Africa, and that was a shock to me. A brother in South Africa picked up Dark Succubus, and I thank him for doing that. He told me about that on YouTube just about an hour ago, and I was shocked to hear that. But the book is starting to have international influence, I think. But this is the second book in the John Haynes series. It's available on Amazon in paperback. It's also available on Kindle Unlimited. And I also made John Haynes A Conversation with Death, which is the first book in the John Haynes series. And this one, a lot of people love. So the John Haynes series, it's been taking off for now, and I urge you guys to go pick it up. Also have Isis All That Glitters, where the goddess next door takes on a bikini-clad bank robber. This one's a fun one. And also have Esteem Goddess of, and also have The Man Who Rules the World. But when it comes down to black empowerment, we have to, again, see value in self, and we have to see value in the black image. Because when you go out here and you have a strong value of self, when you'll go out here and when you see black media, you will seek it out first, like I do. Whenever I see a black creator like Chris L. Brown's Omega Black, I immediately went out and picked that manga up and immediately went out here and supported it. I immediately went out and told people about it. And when I see guys like Chris Miller going out here and doing stuff like Naturally Cute coloring books, I talk about those. Or I see Mike Williams going out here and doing his awesome Deke Sledge comic strip, I go out here and I promote that work, because I want to see that work reach more black readers, because it's important for these black creators to get that support, because they are the ones out here producing positive images of black people, and they produce those images of black people because they love black people, and they want us to learn to love ourselves and see a worth in ourselves. Because when you go out here and you seek out your own image, things made in your own image, and you see beauty in things made in your own image, it can transform your life, and it can transform the way you live. It can literally make you look at yourself and see yourself as somebody that has value in this world. And you can see a value in yourself to the point where you're like, yeah, I'm great. I'm beautiful. I'm smart. And when you have that perception of self, this is something that can take you a long way in this world, because when you see value in yourself, guess what? Other people are going to see a value in you, and you're going to have this positive energy that has people gravitating towards you. And that's core to Black empowerment, because those who see value in self see power in self, and they can capitalize on opportunities to grow. But when you have a negative perception of self and you see others as having more value than you, then what happens is you don't see a value in anything that you do or anything another Black person does. But I see value in myself because I grew up in a family where I was taught value in Blackness, and I grew up in an era where I saw value in Blackness. I mean, when I grew up with shows like Benson and The Cosby Show and the works of people like Spike Lee, Robert Townsend, the Hudlin brothers, that really taught me to see a great value in being Black. And I also, when I was reading things like Milestone Comics, it taught me to see a value in being Black, because when I would sit there and take on that media and I would read that media, it shaped my perception of the world, where I saw a value in being Black, and I saw putting Black first as something that is just a way of life for me. Because whenever I see a Black person, I see value in that Black person. But oftentimes, when it comes down to Black people, we don't see that value in another Black person. That was something, sadly, I saw when I was working at Strive and City College, where you had Black people who were working in these jobs and they were making all of this good money. But again, they couldn't grow anything because they didn't see that value in another Black person. And they thought the only way they could advance themselves was through white people. And when you think you can advance yourself through white people, you are setting yourself back, because you are giving your power to someone else. And when you give your power to somebody else, they are the ones dictating the terms to you, and they're telling you what you're worth. But if somebody's telling you what you're worth, you aren't going to get full value of yourself, because those who get full value of self are those who see a value in themselves, see a value in the living God, and those who go out here and see that value, they look at themselves and they see somebody who is worth it. And if you see yourself as worth it, you're going to go out here and not be afraid to go out here and do what you need to do, or and go out here and stand up, because the whole way that you take power is to see yourself as valuable and to see your value in going for whatever you want to go for. When people want Black empowerment and have the confidence to go for Black empowerment, they see themselves as having not only same value as white people, but having greater value than white people, because they believe what they bring to the table is the best. And when you believe that what you're bringing to the table is the best, you aren't going to go out here and try to bring it down to somebody's level. You're going to say, come up to my level, because on my level, I'm doing something great. And this is the big problem with Black people, is that they sit there and they want others to say that they're great. But those who really truly want to achieve greatness, they see the value in what they're doing, and they go out here and they pursue it to the best of their ability. They bring their passion to the table, and they go out here and they don't bring their value of what they're bringing to the table down. They want you to come up and see what's so great about it. But black people, they are still looking for somebody else to see their value. And when you do that, you can't empower yourself because you're looking for others to give you power, but no one will give you power in this world. You have to take power, and you take power starting with how you see yourself. And this is something most of these black people out here aren't understanding, because even in the face of us having all of these so called professional black people, they are still acting like house slaves. And they're acting like house slaves because they believe that because they have this powerful position with white people, they have to give their power, their acquiesce and defer to them, instead of standing up on their own and trusting in the living God to continue to bless them. Luciano, what do I think the Board of Education did for minority communities? I think it lowered the standards in minority communities, because it used to be black schools had their own standards, and a lot of times their standards were actually higher than many of the white schools. And when black people were out here educating themselves and had their own schools, they would often make efforts to make their schools better, because they knew would have to work harder in some cases to build their own businesses and to go out here and build things for themselves. So a lot of times with this integration with the Brown versus Board of Education, it all became about white validation and white approval, and not about black empowerment. Because when you have classrooms where there is a black teacher, like what I grew up with, where I had at least about 4 or 5 black teachers, it really makes a difference in a child's life. Because when you have a black teacher in front of a black child, that makes the child see themselves in a position of power, and it makes them see that it is possible for them to have that kind of position, and it makes them see a value and worth in blackness. Because when you have a black teacher who is sitting there, what happens is you can identify with this person and see yourself in that position. And I grew up with a lot of black teachers, and I remember one that I had in high school in a minority studies class, so Mr. Nunez, who was a black, I think Cuban or a black Caribbean, and he taught me a lot about black culture, and a lot of that black culture stayed with me to this day. And this was a class I thought wasn't going to be anything, but it was another class that transformed my life. And I remember Professor Flowers at Monroe College, who also had an influence in me. And she had such an influence on me that I named one of my characters Dr. Edna Flowers after her, because it was something that just had a major influence on me. And Doc is seen in many of the ISIS series books, but that character was based on Professor Flowers at Monroe College, who taught me introduction to business and organizational behavior. And that character, I dedicated that character to her, and she's also featured in the Thetas. I'm glad to see you here, Angelique. I'm glad that you're a huge fan of mine. I try to make great content for everyone. Again, Black empowerment is something that means a lot to me, because if we're out here taking care of our business and taking care of ourselves, then we can build that Black community and we can build that Black family. And when we see value in self, then we don't need to seek out validation from others. And this is something that your racists fear, and even many people in other communities fear, because they live off, our money. Because when 97% of Black dollars flow out to Arab owned grocery stores, Korean hair and nail salons, and Indian owned fast food restaurants, that means we are making ourselves poorer. at our own expense. And when we make ourselves poorer at our own expense, then we are going to sit there and wind up remaining in poverty. And when you have black owned businesses, they empower you. And this is something black people don't understand about black owned businesses, is that this is the place where many of our young brothers and sisters got their start back in the 60s and the 40s and the 50s, because we couldn't get jobs at other businesses. And because we couldn't get jobs at other businesses, a lot of us got our starts in black owned businesses. And if it wasn't for those black owned businesses, a lot of us would not have the experience that would allow us to move forward. But sadly, a lot of black people in the 60s and the 70s, they believed in the integration Kool-Aid, and they, instead of them keeping their businesses like the way Koreans and Arabs and everybody else does, and supporting their own businesses, we went to support other people's businesses, taking money out of our community and taking away from our economic base. And when we did that, we lost power because we wound up dependent on other people. And when you wind up dependent on other people, then you don't have anybody to go out here and help you when you're younger. Because a lot of those kids who were 14, 15, and 16 back in the day, they got their start at those black owned stores doing jobs stocking shelves. And that's how they got their start and got that experience that allowed them to move forward. I talk about this in the Man Crisis, how these stores, they empower themselves, but they don't empower you, because those owners don't see a value in you outside of the dollars that you're spending. They don't see a value to you as a person, in that you need to get work experience, you need to get things as related to work ethic. And that was something that people desperately need, because when you get taught by a person who looks like you, it really enforces the value in you. And that was something I wrote about in the novel Spellbound, where I had the Matilda character. She was working at this Kentucky Fried Chicken where I knew it was black owned for years in Harlem, down on 145th Street, and I believe it was Lenox Avenue, I believe. But and I knew where that KFC was. I knew it was black owned for years, and I mentioned it in the novel because I wanted people to see the importance of working for a black owned business, and to see that black owned businesses, they can really shape somebody's life. Because when you have that foundation in seeing a value in black, and you see a value in working with black, then you see a value in yourself, and you take the things that you learn in that black owned business to other places. And that was one of the things that I liked about working at Strive many years ago, was working hand in hand with other black people and brown people. But sadly, a lot of those same black people and brown people didn't see that value in that program that I saw, because for me, working with other black people, that means a lot to me, because seeing another brother or another sister, that's a sign of empowerment, because we are working together towards building something and working towards building and improving our community, because it's those businesses that create the tax base, and it's those businesses that maintain the quality of life. And this is something that foreign businesses don't care about, because the Korean nail salon does not care about the state of the sidewalks. It doesn't care about the kids roaming around. As long as they get their money and they can drive back to their safe neighborhoods, they could give less than a crap about your neighborhood, because they're going to take your 97% of black dollars and then make it where they improve their quality of life. And then your black pastor's going to take the 3% that he gets, or the 10% off the top, but the 3% overall of the 3.3 trillion in cash and credit. He's going to take that money, and what he's going to do is go back to some white person's neighborhood and live high at our expense. So that's why your black community is one of the poorest, even though 3.3 trillion in cash and credit continue to flow through your black community, because black people, again, don't see a value in self, don't see a value in working with each other, and don't see a value in standing together. And this was something, sadly, that I heard about on Facebook when I talked about what I learned as related to the whole passport videos is that some of those black males got mad because they thought I was supposedly um, being influenced by Ringo, and I have to address that because I was never influenced by Ringo. Ringo saw the passport videos and decided to go his own way with his own um, theme as related to it. Now, I was the one who created the first passport video, but some of these people think that I was being influenced by him. No, I created the first passport video and he decided to create his own content. Ringo rolls solo, he does his own thing. I do my own thing. And then there were some people who were upset about me working with Black Up Inya, aka Chris Miller. I love his work and I support his work, and that's something I like. I like his work a lot and I like his content, but he does his own thing. I do my own thing, and I'm rolling solo myself. And again, we all three of us black men, we make similar content, and I value their content. I respect them as men, and I respect a lot of the values they both talk about because Ringo, Black Up Inya, Chris Miller, they are about many of the things I talk about as related to my SJS Direct imprint, the things that I have been promoting ever since 1991, way back when I was in high school, because my mission with the SJS Direct imprint started when I was 17 years old, and I was hearing about all of this gangster rap coming out, and I said I wanted to create positive images about black people and wanted to promote diverse images of black people with my writing. So my foundation started way back then as related to my content, and I have been producing that content for almost 30 years now. And this was all about my whole black empowerment narrative, which is something I have been pushing even before this internet blew up and became what it is. And when I look at the content of brothers like Ringo, TV Raw, aka Black Male Advice TV, and Black Up Inya, Chris Miller, I see the content of brothers who are just like myself. We are about black empowerment. We are about promoting the positive image of black people. We are about promoting the image of black love. We are about promoting the image of black on black love. And we are about promoting a black family. And this is something, again, that is featured in many of my books, whether it be books like The Temptation of John Haynes, which is features a whole theme on black love and features a theme on black empowerment. And I wrote this book way back in 2005, before when I was broke and living off of $60 a month that a relative was giving me. I wrote that book back then, and I was pushing those narratives about black empowerment, pushing those narratives about black family, and pushing those narratives about black love with this book when I was writing it. And I was pushing narratives about black females loving themselves in screenplays like All About Maryland that I wrote in 2007. And this was the screenplay that started the SJS Direct imprint. This was the book that started the SJS Direct imprint. And this was the book that I pushed hard, even in the face of my own family turning on me as related to it because they didn't like the cover. But I still continued to persevere, again, because I wanted to create positive images of black people so that black people could see a worth in themselves. And some people out here believe because I agree with Ringo and Chris Miller about the black family, black love, and black empowerment that I am being influenced by them. But no, I have been about this ever since 1991 when I was 17 years old. And again, I grew up in a community where I saw things like black love. I saw black families. I saw black people loving each other. I saw black people loving each other in movies and television. I saw a sense of love for black beauty. I saw black men loving black women. I saw black men seeing beauty in black women. I saw black men seeing black women as attractive and desirable. And I saw things that made me see that we need to keep preserving this black love in our community. And this is the thing that I do with my work because this is something that means a lot to me. Because when we love ourselves, we take the greatest power away from white supremacy. Because when you see a black man loving a black woman, then white supremacy cannot go in and say that it is better than black people, because when black people see value in other black people, then you cannot say that a white person is superior to a black person. And that's why I pushed back so hard against the so-called passport black males, because they were pushing against black empowerment, and they were pushing against black people loving other black people, because in their minds, based on the bad experiences they had in the past with black women, they want to elevate people of other races above black women and black people, not understanding that when you do that, you are practicing white supremacy. And it looks like we have a troll I need to get rid of, because they don't want to hear things about black empowerment, and they don't want to hear things about black empowerment. They don't want to see a black person talking about black love. They don't want to see a black person talking about black empowerment. They don't want to see a black person talking about black people loving other black people. What they want to hear is, I need to find love in a white person. I need to find love in a non black person. And that is self hatred, because you are elevating someone above you, and you are elevating somebody to be higher than you. And again, that's what white supremacy wants to see, because when you see black people talking about how much they see that somebody is better than them, that's when you get that same screwed up mindset that you saw with these people in that Texas courtroom, because those people in that Texas courtroom, they saw this themselves as better than, they saw those white people as better than them. And to see that again shows the same type of mentality that your swirlers have, that your passport black males have. They all have the same frame of thinking that your people in that Texas courtroom have. And they are willing to, thank you, Ringo, very much for the donation. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the content you're producing, because you are teaching these brothers the ways of the Most High that they really need to learn. And I really appreciate it. So you guys need to sub to Ringo's Black Male Advice TV. But again, we all have our own way, but we all have the same value, and we all are promoting the same message about black empowerment and black love. Because if you can't love your own woman, or you can't love your own man, then how can you go out here and talk about how you want change in your community? You can't change anything until you change your perception of self. And a lot of these passport brothers out here, they don't understand that it's their perception of self that is just as messed up as those same people in that Texas courtroom who were sitting there patting that white woman on the head and sitting there talking about how they forgive this white woman and making a god out of that white woman. That was, again, the most disturbing thing I have ever seen. And again, it just shows how black people fear black empowerment and how they fear having taking power in their lives because they're so afraid of a white man that they fear taking their power as black people. And I would rather affiliate with brothers like Ringo and Chris Miller, even though they're rolling solo. I like their messages. I like their content because they are talking about black love. They are talking about black empowerment, and they are talking about seeing a value and worth in self. And when you see value and worth in self, it is the thing that is going to move us all forward as a race. Because if we don't see value in self, we're going to see more people like Amber Guyger being made into gods when in actuality, these demons are out to terrify us. They're out to destroy us. And they can only destroy us because we don't take power to rebuke them and hold them accountable in the same way that your John Haynes did when he took on the succubus in Dark Succubus, who was seeking to destroy him. He fought the succubus because he had faith in God, and because he had faith in God, he was able to beat the succubus. So, again, this is a part of how I live, and I put it in my content. So, when I talk about the fear of black empowerment, black people, again, are afraid to take that power, just like those people in that courthouse in Texas, because they see white people as their God, and they don't want to stand up and take that power that God has given them. He's given you the power, but you just have to have the courage to step out on God's promises and achieve what you want to achieve, and stand up as a black man and a black woman and be the best black man and black woman you can be. I'm gonna wrap up the stream and call it a night. And I would really appreciate it if you guys who are watching the stream would pick up John Haynes' Dark Succubus. Had my first sale in South Africa, so I really appreciate the brother who supported me with this book. And I really appreciate the brother again in South Africa who picked up John Haynes' Dark Succubus. And if you want to pick up the start of the John Haynes saga, you can start with The Temptation of John Haynes, which is available on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle formats. And you can also pick up the sequel to The Temptation of John Haynes, The Man Who Rules the World, which is also available in paperback and Kindle formats. And if you guys could pick up Isis, All That Glitters, Eastern Goddess of, John Haynes, A Conversation with Death, I would really appreciate it. And all of these books, John Haynes' Dark Succubus, these are all part of the 2019 catalog, and they're available on paperback and Kindle formats. And it's available on Kindle Unlimited. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read these for free. And you can also pick up All About Marilyn, my first screenplay, a story about a black woman taking power over Hollywood and walking away from Hollywood and what Hollywood was trying to do to her. This one will teach you about the black female taking power and control over her own image and empowering herself. And it's a very powerful story. So this is the first book of the SJS Direct imprint. It's going to be having its 10th anniversary this December. So I'd appreciate if you guys would pick this one up as well. I thank you all for coming to the stream. And I'm going to call it a night. And I'm going to thank you all for coming. And I'm going to have another stream probably next week. If you guys want to give me suggestions for other live streams, I really appreciate it. But I thank you all for coming out tonight.